Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel, as always. Hope everybody's having a good beginning to their week. My Pirates stunk it up, and by the time you hear this, I'll know if they stunk it up tonight against Jake Arrieta. I'm expecting another loss. Way it goes, I guess. Not happy about that at all. In any case, I wanted to tell you a little funny story. I've told you that my parents left me all of this food when they went back to Pennsylvania at the end of March. And I should say I still have some of that food left. And I was reading an interview that Prince did back in the mid-'80s when he was at the top of the charts, just kicking butt all over the place in music, in Hollywood, on his tours, just everything. Of course, just completely changing the music industry, and you can see that effect even up till today, 30 years later. But he was doing an interview, and the interviewer asked him, Prince, is there anything you can't do? And he said, cook, which I think is pretty funny, because that's how I'd probably answer that question too. Although I have to admit that yesterday there was these frozen chicken breasts that my parents had left me, and I still hadn't gotten to them yet. And took one of them out, and you know what? I did it pretty well, and I didn't even I did use the microwave to kind of thaw it a little bit, but I ended up cooking it in the pan on the top of the stove. I tell you what, came out pretty good. It's actually a little scary. It was so good. It was actually like, I'm not even sure how I did this. And keep in mind, though, I don't like knowing how to do this. This just is going to give me more work maybe somewhere down the road if somebody wants me to cook for them. Because now I have a little bit of experience, and I don't want to lie to somebody like that. So I'm in quite a quandary here. But I still have some other chicken breasts to go, so they're going to have to be eaten one way or another, so I guess I'm going to have to cook those ones too. That C-O-O-K word, I hate it. But let's get to the show. But also by the time you're hearing this, besides me knowing what my Pirates did tonight, we'll also know what happened in Indiana. I'm not predicting anything good, frankly. Just a feeling. I don't think that it's going to be Wisconsin. I don't think it's going to be, of course, Utah. It's, of course, not going to be Texas. It's not going to be Iowa. There just seems to be, I think that there is a little bit of fatigue going on out there among never Trump people. I think it seems that maybe they've lost a little hope. Not to saying they're going to vote for Trump, but it's like, well, think that's the way it's going to go, and I can understand that. Don't get me wrong. I get it. I don't like it, but I understand it, and I think that's going on in Indiana, on top of the fact that the demographics in Indiana, from what we've seen in the process, in the primary process, if a state is really, really, really Republican, like Utah, Wyoming, then Ted Cruz wins. If the I keep saying country, state is somewhere in between, like Wisconsin, it seems it's also Cruz territory. But those Republican states that have gone Republican every presidential election, but aren't overtly Republican, those seem to be the Trump hotbeds. And that kind of feels to me like what Indiana is. Kind of feels like it. Despite what these polls are saying, and they're all over the place, just feels to me like this is going to be a 5 or 6 point Trump win, and that's horrible. We never Trump people. We're going to be tested from now, I think, until November. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe Ted Cruz has some plan. We'll see. We'll see. But along those lines, and getting back to me mentioning Prince before, so I'm predicting a Trump win in Indiana. I don't know how many delegates he's going to get. I'm not even going to try to get into that stuff. But along those lines, once again, going back to Prince and something that I just discovered on my own within the last couple days. And this is the exact reason. I know it's going to seem like a funny analogy, but I think that it really does mean something regarding what's going on now. Is I was just doing some reading on the internet this weekend, and I was listening to some Prince songs because, as I predicted, as soon as he died, all this Prince music showed up on YouTube, which I have to admit is kind of nice. And I was on Wikipedia, and I was reading about the song Purple Rain. And first of all, you should know that how he got the name Purple Rain was from the sky being blue and there being blood in the sky, which means there are dark days or something. You know, blood in the sky is, you know, it's a foretelling of something bad that was going to happen. And so the combination of blue and red, the color of blood, is purple. And what happens when the sky starts to fall? Well, it would create purple rain. You didn't know that, did you? Well, that's where he got it from. But in reading about that song, not just the album, but the song specifically, Purple Rain, do you realize that it never hit number one in the United States? Never hit number one in the United States, despite it being popular. And if you don't know, Purple Rain is now the number one selling song, most popular tune in England right now. I just heard that on the radio today. Because of Prince dying. But it never reached number one. Despite it being now an iconic song, despite, him playing it as his finale at the Super Bowl show in 2007, despite it selling millions and millions of times, despite it, I guess Prince ending many of his concerts with it, back when it came out, it never reached number one on the popular Billboard charts here in the United States. It got to number one on some of the niche markets, but on the big board, it never reached number one. You know what it was beat by? Once again, keep in mind, this isn't why I'm not a populist. It was beat by a song that, no doubt, it was popular. That's only how you get to be number one. But within a year, and people still know it today. If you were alive at the time, you remember the tune. But was not an iconic song. Was a song that was here today, gone tomorrow. The group that did it was here today, gone tomorrow. Even though one of the guys continued to do a lot of great music on his own. You know what that song was? Purple Rain was beat for the number one spot by Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham. Now that seems kind of funny now, doesn't it? All these years later, over 30 years later. I'm not saying there aren't still people that like that song, but it surely, overall in the last 30 years, has not had an effect on music in the industry and people like Purple Rain has. Has it? No. And see what this shows, and I even posted this, if you follow me on Facebook, and you should, I actually posted that fact a couple days ago about Wake Me Up Before You Go in Purple Rain. So if you've already read that, my little quiz here was not a surprise to you. But it just shows how people at any particular time cannot understand the importance or significance of books, music, historical events, people. They're all about right now. What makes me laugh right now? What makes me happy right now? What makes me sad right now? Despite people investing in their 401ks and the IRAs and talking about the future. The fact is, your average person is just trying to get through today because, hey, as we all know, no day is guaranteed. I talked about 2 disc golfers from the Tampa area that died this weekend, one in a motorcycle accident, one in a road rage incident, being shot to death in his car. No day is guaranteed. However, we know, on the other hand, you can't live like that you just pretend like tomorrow's never going to come. Because if you do, you'll be broke. You'll actually ruin your life if you actually believe every day that this is your last on earth. Because for most people, tomorrow will come. 99.9% of the people in the United States will see tomorrow, despite the fact that every day is not guaranteed. It's this very delicate balance that you try to figure out throughout your life. To go for things or play it safe, to go for something, to play it safe, you just can't tell. You just don't know. And getting back to this comparison between Purple Rain and Wake Me Up Before You Go, a majority of Americans thought that Wake Me Up Before You Go, their musical tastes were more along those lines of that song by Wham, George Michael and Aaron Ridgely, if you forget the other guy's name, and was a better song, more popular than Purple Rain by Prince. A guy who had popular songs up until that time, and Wham kind of just came out of nowhere. And they, of course, went on to do Careless Whisper and some other songs that were good, but then they broke up, and George Michael continued to go for a few years. And he's still around. But what left a bigger mark on people? A lasting impression? Of course, Purple Rain did, and it's not even close. And in fact, you go to some lists of 1980s tunes, Purple Rain is ranked up there very, very close to the top. Wake Me Up Before You Go doesn't even register. Despite, at that particular time in 1984, Wake Me Up Before You Go was seen as being a better song by more people in the United States. Once again, this is why I am not a populist. Because you know what? Sometimes what is most popular pales in comparison to something else. And see, that's the tough part regarding living, being a human, having a brain where you try to understand the world. We have a hard time seeing things, the subtleties of what's going to last and what's not, what's important, what's not. It takes something like a Pearl Harbor or a September 11th to really impact people to the point where they know that this is a big deal. Anything below that, it's tough. I don't know where the line is, but it's tough. Even something in like Benghazi, you have a lot of people, you have a hard time getting a lot of people to care about it. It's for people. It's over on some continent. Most people think, what the hell are those people doing there anyway? That's why, to this day, Hillary Clinton will never spend a day in jail in it and has gotten away with the foibles that she committed that night. Not just her, but many other people. That's why. Because just not enough people care. They know about it. They just don't care. They don't see the significance of it. Now, getting once again back to the Wake Me Up Before You Go versus Purple Rain argument, you know, and dare I say it, if you're a person out there who still likes Wake Me Up Before You Go more than Purple Rain, I don't know what to tell you. But it's clear to me that Donald Trump is Wake Me Up Before You Go. He is a flavor of the month song, which is exactly what Wake Me Up Before You Go. Hey, and I was 14 years old at the time. I remember that song like it was yesterday. I remember it being popular. I remember it being played at the roller skating rink that I used to go to in North Apollo. I remember it like it was yesterday. I can still smell that roller rink place, the wood, and I could feel it, smell it as if I was there. But even back then, I can remember thinking, this Prince guy, you know what? His music is really good. And Wake Me Up Before You Go, I guess it's okay. But surely the better of those two artists, those groups, bands, Prince and the Revolution, and Wham, surely Prince and the Revolution is the more iconic one. It just so happens that there was a majority of people who didn't think like I did. But Donald Trump is Wake Me Up Before You Go. He's a flavor of the month. He's a fad. He has the kind of talk that'll work today, but not tomorrow. Maybe this year, but not next year. Whereas I see Ted Cruz, and as funny as a comparison this may be, I see Ted Cruz more along the lines of Prince. Of music that lasts. Because I think that Ted Cruz has values and principles that just aren't fashionable today, May 3rd, 2016, but are fashionable anytime, anywhere. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 32 years from now, which is the distance between now, the time span between now and going way back to 1984. Those years have just flown. I feel that those people who have latched on to Donald Trump are the same type of people that thought that Wake Me Up Before You Go should be number one and Purple Rain should be number two. See, we get so caught up in saying, well, look at me, look how I voted. Well, it must be right. Other people are doing it. It must be right. Look at all the other people who are voting for Donald Trump. You must be the wrong ones. Not necessarily. There is a reason that we here in the United States are supposed to and have had this thing against populism, which is just another word for majority rules all the time. That we're just going to do whatever the people think. And I know that this is, I've run into this before. This is a very difficult situation, and it's the reason why dictatorships and monarchies have been so popular throughout history. Monarchies, I didn't pronounce that right, did I? Monarchies. There's a reason those forms of government have been so popular. Here's why. In a representative government like we have in the United States, whether it's a straight democracy type of situation or a representative republic like we have in the United States, the people who are elected are supposed to be the servants. However, they are the leaders at the same time. That's what's so difficult. That is the paradox of democracy and republicanism and voting for your leaders. Because on one hand, they're voted in by a majority of the people, but what if that majority ends up being wrong on a particular topic, and that representative has to make a decision in Congress? What happens? Is he or she supposed to go along with the majority, or is he or she supposed to go along with the minority that he or she believes is right? So they're supposed to follow what we want, but on the other hand, they have this kind of autonomy as well. And that can be very difficult, I think, to figure out. And once again, I think that's the reason the dictatorships, where everything is just top down, the people just follow whatever the dictator says, whatever the king says, whatever the queen says, whatever the despot says, whatever Kim Jong-un says. Because those kinds of governments are a little easier to understand. They're horrible because no one person can have that kind of power and exercise it judiciously. But they're easier to understand. Ours, hard to understand. And once again, the reason is the reason they're hard to enact. Because in too many places where democracies have been set up, suddenly the leaders start thinking, well, hey, I got the majority opinion on this. I get to do whatever the majority says. And that's when the minority starts to suffer. I'm going to do whatever. The people say that I should do whatever is good for the country. Doesn't matter what happens to the minority. This is the exact reason I don't believe in that saying, putting America first. Well, not all Americans agree on what that means and what is going to happen to those people who don't. Because I think when you get right down to it, once we start figuring out what that saying means, there are going to be many and many, many people who don't agree with it. And would a President Donald Trump have the courage to take into consideration the other side? Who knows? He might find himself going from the majority to the minority very quickly. That is what is so tough about our form of government. We elect leaders to do what we want, but you know what? We're not always right. Sometimes we pick Wake Me Up Before You Go before Purple Rain. And that representative, that senator, even the president's going to be sitting in his office saying, you know what? I know Purple Rain is a better song than Wake Me Up Before You Go, but what am I supposed to do? I know this seems like a funny analogy, but you want to understand the context. If you're 45 and older, you definitely understand what I'm talking about here, given those songs at that time, if you can remember that. And if you were into pop music at the time. Because those songs were everywhere. Looking at it now, if you were to just randomly pick out Wake Me Up Before You Go, and you didn't know the context for 30-some years ago, and you took out Purple Rain, once again, out of a barrel and just put them together and let people listen to them, it's obvious that Purple Rain is going to leave more of an impression on people than Wake Me Up Before You Go now. And if you told them, you know what, back then, Wake Me Up Before You Go was more popular, that will blow people's minds. That would blow people's minds if you could do some sort of blind listening test like that. So it's fascinating to me. It really is fascinating because now those two songs aren't even seen as being in the same universe. Yes, if it comes on in some radio station, on some office somewhere in the United States, maybe you'll get a couple people dancing in their cubicles. Maybe. But Purple Rain comes on, and that hits people in places. And a lot of people probably don't even understand what the words are about. You know a song is good when people don't even need to understand the words and the meaning of the song to like it. That's how I know it's good. I think about that Shakira song, Ojos Así, which was in her Spanish singing days before she started doing songs in English. Back in about 2000, that song came out. I didn't even know what she was saying because it's all in Spanish, and I thought the song was fantastic. Ojos Así, you can look up that one on YouTube. But in that time, that point in space, 1984, Wake Me Up Before You Go was seen as being overall a more pleasurable song, a better song. It got played more at that time than Purple Rain did. And Purple Rain had the advantage of course, being on an album with, Purple Rain, the album is considered to be one of the top 500 albums of all time. What was Wham's album called? I don't even know. With Wake Me Up Before You Go. I don't even know. And that's why, going back to this comparison between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, if you were to just randomly pick Donald Trump and his beliefs out of a barrel, having no context of anything, but just listening to his speeches and everything else, and then listening to Ted Cruz, just pull out Ted Cruz out of the other one. Once again, nobody knowing their backgrounds or anything else, most people would pick Ted Cruz. That see him as being more presidential, that see him as making more sense, more level-headed, on and on and on. They'd look at this Donald Trump guy and say, he sounds crazy to me. There's no way that he could be getting more votes. But it's happening. And this is the reason that we need to stay away from populism in this country. The majority gets it wrong many times. Being that I've been criticizing conservative media for so long, I think that it's misled conservatives. This is one of the problems that I've had about it for a long time. Well before Donald Trump thought about running for president, maybe he's been thinking about it. I don't know how long he's been thinking about it. But before he declared we wanted to run for president last year, that I've had a problem with conservative media for a long time. Always talking about the will of the American people. You know what? I get it. It's true sometimes. Sometimes the will of the American people are on our side. Sometimes. But you know what? A majority of American people think the minimum wage should be raised. No matter how many arguments we've made against it over the years. Are they right on that? Because as soon as you can find something that they're wrong on, then you can't keep going back to the will of the American people state that. You have to be a little bit more discerning. There should be qualifiers to all of it. If we'd have gone along with the will of the American people, we would still be part of England because, as far as we can tell, a couple centuries later, only 1/3 of the colonists in the mid to late 1700s wanted to separate from England. The will of the, I guess you could call them, American people was that let's just stay with England. So the will of the American people that statement didn't even work back then. How can you use it now? And we know that there is another layer of examination in everything that needs to be done besides what the American people want. I guess that's why I've told you there is a part of me that is a little bit elitist, and I don't make any bones about it, because I realize the majority gets it wrong quite a bit. I also, on the other hand, know that we have, on many topics in this country, a very militant, very wrong, very evil minority. But you just can't say that one is wrong all the time and the other is right all the time and say, well, the will of the American people, sometimes it's hard just to tell what anybody wants. That's why when they do these polls about the United States and government and the direction of the country, you ask people 50 questions and they will contradict themselves on at least 10 of them. Once again, not because they're stupid. I don't believe that. But people just aren't used to thinking in things that way. Your average person does not sit down from day to day and make sure that all of their beliefs about the world make sense. All right? And I can understand that. That's more the job of people like me. To try to explain to people why they should change their mind on this or on that so their thoughts are aligned. So they don't have any contradictions in their life. And the truth is, conservatism hasn't been doing that. Our conservative leaders have not been doing that. Why? Because they've gotten so caught up in the will of the people. Well, you know what? If you keep doing that, somebody's going to come along like a Donald Trump that's going to use that against conservatism. And that's who Donald Trump is. He is wake me up before you go. Wake me up before you go, I guess you could say, exposed the lack of musical knowledge that the American people had back in 1984. And it took American people a little while to figure out that, wow, I guess Purple Rain is a much better song. Now that we're looking back at it now, is a much better song than Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. The difference is that's just music. What we're talking about here, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and the persistence of good ideas is a little more important than that. But I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we are back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. Can I even begin to explain to you how much I love using pop culture references in relation to politics? Using those comparisons, I think they're fantastic. Because I know that people, in this example from the first part of the show, I know that people take their music as seriously as they take their politics. We've all been there when you've played music that somebody doesn't like and they react to it. It's no different than if you turn on, as a conservative, turn on talk radio and the liberals sitting there. It's the same reaction. I can't believe you think that way. I can't believe you listened to that. You actually went to that concert. You actually gave money to that politician. It's kind of the same. The difference is music, as much enjoyment as it gives us, doesn't mean as much as world affairs. But I love being able to relate both of them. I think that's fantastic. I love it. Let's move on to something else. Speaking of pop culture, I saw this post on Facebook by Dennis Miller, and as I've told you, I am big Dennis. I've been a big Dennis Miller fan, and I was not happy to see that when he decided to stop doing his radio show. I think I told you at the time that I think that he just got fed up with everything. I think that back in 2012, he'd been doing his radio show for a while and doing politics for a while, we know that. But he really got involved in 2012 with Mitt Romney. Went out on the road, made some appearances with Mitt Romney. And then Mitt Romney, of course, I wouldn't say got killed in the election, but he didn't come close to winning. I think that had a lasting effect on Dennis Miller. He was never quite the same guy on his show after that. And I remember, I was listening to him in 2012 when that all happened. And I think that he stopped doing his show, was it last year, maybe the end of 2014, something like that. So he continued for a couple more years, let's say, and did not renew. He didn't just quit, but I think his contract was coming up, and he just said, I'm just not going to bother doing this anymore. I'm going to guess that he left a lot of money on the table. But I could tell after that election that he was just a little bit done. Just totally jaded by the entire process. And in a way, and he continues to say that to this day, is that the United States, he believes, is just going down into the crapper. If you've heard him, any talks that he's done, if you've happened to catch, and I will admit, although I don't have Fox News and I don't watch Fox News, I try to make it a point to see his appearances on O'Reilly's show every week. It's the only part of the O'Reilly show that I've ever think about watching. But he had a post on Facebook yesterday, because I follow him on Facebook, and reacting to what Ted Cruz said yesterday in Indiana. If you don't know what went on in Indiana yesterday regarding Ted Cruz, is that Ted Cruz was making an appearance there, and he made this statement, we are not, in trying to get people to vote for him, he said, we're not a bitter, angry, petty, bigoted people. And we know who he's referencing in that. We know who he's talking about. We know that he's talking about Donald Trump and at least some of Donald Trump's supporters. Well, to put it nicely, Dennis Miller did not care for that at all. And Dennis Miller said, I'm not supporting Ted Cruz's campaign. And he says that he makes the point of bringing up what Ted Cruz said. And then he says something about Ted Cruz along the lines of he is a BS artist. And in, of course, Dennis Miller fashion, his BS alarm is going off like you'd hear in a submarine when you hear dive, dive, dive. And if anybody's ever watched any submarine movie, you know what I'm talking about. Now, see, this is once again, it seems to me, this is another somewhat conservative person in conservative media who is shooting off his nose to spite his face. In Dennis Miller's case, I think it comes from being disgusted with the process. But to me, what he said yesterday, and being a Dennis Miller fan, is gone too far for me, and I'm going to have to distance myself from him. I would remind Dennis Miller of a couple things. There is only, and I'm not saying that Dennis Miller is a Donald Trump supporter. I'm not saying that, okay? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I think that he is of the fact of he's never Hillary and never Bernie. He'll pick anybody over them. And see, I've made the argument before. As soon as you start liking that, start thinking like that, you'll take anything. He's going to vote for who the Republican is, even if he says, maybe I should check that for a moment. Is he going to vote for Ted Cruz if Ted Cruz gets the nomination, even though he thinks Ted Cruz is a big BSer? I wish I could say that on the show, but I can't because we got FCC rules. Is he going to do that anyway, even though he thinks that Ted Cruz is a big BSer? Really? Because I will tell Dennis Miller that what Ted Cruz said about bigoted and petty is much more accurate than what Dennis Cruz said about Ted Cruz. Because I would remind Ted Cruz there is only one candidate on either side of the aisle who gets support from the Ku Klux Klan and has not distanced himself from the Ku Klux Klan. There is only one candidate who has made a lot of disparaging comments against women. There's only one candidate who has incited violence at his rallies. There is only one candidate who is so defensive of himself that he gets offended when somebody talks about his fingers. There's only one on either side. And in fact, all of those things could fall into the category of being bitter, angry, petty, and bigoted. Bitter would be the part that he claims that Ted Cruz is cheating, which Ted Cruz isn't. Angry is the violence that he has incited, for his supporters and wanting them to do things at his rallies. Petty is about his fingers, and bigoted it is about his continuing acceptance of Ku Klux Klan support. So I want to know, Dennis Miller, is Ted Cruz wrong? And on top of that, if you say that he's a BSer, on what exactly? On what exactly? I listened to your show, Dennis Miller, for at least since I lived in Las Vegas. So that was 2009, 2010, up until he went off the air. So that's like 4 or 5 years. What you talked about on your show was very much in line with Ted Cruz is saying now. Are you a BSer too, Dennis Miller? I just want to know. Let's just talk facts. You're a Pittsburgh guy. I'm a Pittsburgh guy. Let's just talk like a couple of yinzers. If you don't know what yinzers are, you're just going to have to look. For the listeners, if you don't know what a yinzer is, you're going to have to look it up. Just a couple Pittsburgh boys. I went to Grove City. You went to Point Park College. We're both Steeler fans, both Pirate fans. You're more of a hockey fan than I am, and I can live with that. You talked about character and all those things on your show. That's why you supported Mitt Romney. Here Ted Cruz comes along and you say he's a BSer. He's closer to Mitt Romney than Donald Trump is when it goes along the lines of character. Or can't you see that? Have you gotten so caught up in all of this that you can't see that? Once again, this is a conservative media guy who led conservatives for years. And now this is what he's saying on Facebook. See, to me, as I've told you, I don't get caught up in the delivery and the appearance. I realize that that is a difficult thing to do. It's hard to be one way and seem like another. All right? I don't know Ted Cruz behind the scenes. Maybe it is all a show. I'm not there to see it. Doesn't feel like it to me. I'm just going by his record in the Senate. I'm just looking at what he has put on the record and is out there for everyone to see. I don't care about his appearance or the inflection of his voice or whether he sounds like an evangelical preacher. I don't care about all that. I care about his record. And the funny thing is, when we hire people, I've had an opportunity to hire people in my life when I worked at 7-Eleven for a little bit, when I did my movies, check people out, interview actors, see them perform in sketches before I decide whether I wanted them to be in an independent movie. I never cared about their personality. I only cared if they were going to do a good job or not. That's all that has ever mattered to me. If you ever meet me, all I really care about is, can you get something done? And do you have a record of getting something done? Whereas what we know about Donald Trump is he's gotten some things done with the help of big government. Something that we as conservatives are supposed to be against. He's had a lot of failures. Seems like he screwed a lot of people over during his time. And so Dennis Miller gets so caught up because, I think, at least in the United States, when we think about the idea of somebody who's a BSer, that's a character issue because BSers just mean he's a liar. And somebody's not just a liar, they're a huge liar. And that's a character issue. Right? Well, Mitt Romney is not exactly jumping behind Donald Trump, even though Dennis Miller jumped behind Mitt Romney. And see, that's why this is all, once again, so hard to figure out. And that's why I've tried to tell you that being never Trump and then not voting for anybody is a much more character-filled action than just saying, I'm going to vote for whoever's against Hillary Clinton. Because when you do that, you'll continue to get bad people. I can see it going along with it once, maybe twice, like we did in 2012 and 2008. I've had my fill of that. In fact, if you really, really, really wanted to get specific, we've done that for a while now. More than just 2 elections. Those people who have said that you have to vote Republican just because, I've tried it their way. I'm not saying that their way was wrong at the time. I'm just saying that we've tried it their way. Let's try something else. Let's try something else. And when people say that we should keep going down the same road of just voting against the Democrats, but not voting for them. I'm not saying vote for any Democrats. I'm certainly not saying that. But just remembering that your vote is a seal of approval instead of just a choice. I was talking about that chicken breast earlier. The FDA stamps those things, saying that they're certified. Putting your stamp on that, putting your stamp on a particular selection, a particular candidate, a particular politician means something. And maybe that's the way conservative media should have been portraying that for a long time, but they didn't. Too scared of the other side. Made you afraid of what was going to happen. Well, all it did was allow bad candidates to continue to get nominated. That's all it did. We taught those people who aren't as conservative as we are that we'll go along. We've gone along. We've been nice. Now we're not going to go along anymore. And to too many of us, Donald Trump seems like more of the same. Because he's certainly not conservative. I mean, what did he just say? I'm conservative. We can't worry about that right now. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? It must mean he's going to do something else. And anything else besides conservatism is liberalism. Right? So, Dennis Miller, you've lost me. You've gone too far for your fellow Pittsburgher. And I know that you grew up closer to downtown Pittsburgh than I did, but still. We're still kind of Pittsburghers, both of us. You've gone too far, man. You've taken, in my opinion, you've taken this all too personally. And that's the other part of it, because I think the reason he reacted that way is because he intends to vote for Donald Trump if Donald Trump is the nominee. And so he's thinking, well, is Ted Cruz saying I'm petty and bigoted and everything? Well, since when, Dennis Miller's the one that can't believe how crazy people are so sensitive these days. Sounds to me like he's a little sensitive too, don't you think? The funny thing is Donald Trump can go on and on about Cruz supporters and Ted Cruz and how his supporters are this and his supporters are that. I don't take any offense to it at all. It's not personal to me. This is all just business. My values are personal to me, and I try to act on those values in my life, my public life, my personal life, my political life. But if Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or anybody else wants to go on and on about anybody who's voted for Ted Cruz is a kook, I'm just not affected by that at all. And see, I start to wonder what makes me different. What makes me, and I guess maybe a lot of other people who support Ted Cruz, different? That we aren't as touchy. I'm much more touchy about, I guess you'd say, Dennis Miller saying that Ted Cruz is a BSer than anything that Dennis Miller could say about me personally. About my voting habits and who I support. But mainly with Ted Cruz is just because it's not true. Whereas what Ted Cruz says is certainly more true. It's certainly more true. But once again, that doesn't mean that Dennis Miller or any other Trump supporter has to take it personally. They can just go on with their lives. They'll be fine. It's just Ted Cruz is putting that out there. I may say something else about what Ted Cruz did yesterday. The 7 minutes that he spent with that Trump supporter. As much as I like Ted Cruz, that was a mistake. There's nothing that's going to be gained by that. Everybody knows, anybody who is not for Donald Trump, who knows? That guy could have been a plant. Who knows? Who knows? This is the same way I looked, as I've talked about yesterday, these conservatives who go to college campuses and spend an hour arguing with a bunch of 19-year-old brats. There's nothing to be gained from that at all. At all. And the time that Ted Cruz, I can understand saying hi to that guy. The guy gives Ted Cruz a hard time. Ted Cruz says something back, just smiles and keeps moving. 7 minutes? 7 minutes. You're not going to win that guy's vote. You're not going to, anybody who watches that conversation, I don't think is going to be fazed one way or the other. People are probably already made up their minds in that little group there anyway. I know Ted Cruz is trying to show how accepting he is of the other side, very much more so than Donald Trump is. But for those of us who tend to be objective about all this, we already know that. There aren't going to be any Donald Trump supporters who are going to watch that and say, you know what, this Ted Cruz guy, you know what, I think we got him wrong. So I just don't like it. I know that that's one of those things. Well, politicians, they have to get down and talk to the common man, and not if the common man's an idiot. Not if I know that when I watch it, that common man is just saying stuff to troll Ted Cruz. Not if I know that. Right? It's just kind of funny. Let's move on to something else. Something happened. I read something yesterday that was a shocker to me. I never thought that I would see this in my lifetime, but it just shows you that those of us who have had the pulse on what is going on are way more accurate than we ever could have believed. Can you believe that CNN is now beating Fox News in certain demographics? Now, overall, CNN is still not getting as many viewers as Fox News is. But there was a time when we know that Fox News was so far ahead, so far. But if you look at the trend this year, not just the last month, but this beginning of this year, you see that CNN is beating Fox News in the very valuable 25 to 54 demographic during some of the big hours of the day, of the popular hours of the day. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Jeff Zucker, who is the guy who took over CNN, he's even come out recently and said, you know what? It probably was the case that we were just a little too liberal. And that's why we've taken some of these people off the air and put a few more middle of the road people and a few more conservatives on there. That is something that honest to God, I never thought that I would see CNN almost as popular as Fox News again. But that just shows you the kind of damage that Fox News has done to itself. And I was listening to a podcast with Jim Garrity from National Review and Greg Corombos from American News Radio or something like that. And they were talking about this. And they brought up specifically Sean Hannity. Both of them know him well. And neither of them can understand the change in his personality to the point of, on Twitter, using the a-hole word, in response to some people who are criticizing him. But the fact is, though, is that Fox News is the one who made the choice to get in bed with Donald Trump. It's been their choice to do all these fluffy pieces with him, and it has affected their ratings badly. Because it's not just that Fox News is having viewers and CNN is gathering new viewers. It's easy to see from those stats that there are people who are watching Fox News who aren't watching anymore, and it seems some of them are going back to CNN because it seems like more balanced coverage. Now, that is bizarro world. If you'd have told me that a year ago, I would have said, what? What did you just tell me? But it's true. Nothing is forever, folks, if you treat your customers and viewers the wrong way. Walmart, Microsoft, Apple, Publix, whatever the case may be, nothing is forever. All it takes is a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and people, if they think that you're not providing them with quality news, quality entertainment, quality services, quality products, they will leave. And frankly, Fox News has been providing crap for their viewers for the last year. What can I say? But I got to go. EdwardDentzel.com is where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can also find them at Podbean, Podomatic, SoundCloud, and YouTube. EdwardDentzel.com/book is where you can download for free the first chapter of my next novel called The Comebacks. Facebook, LinkedIn, yes, you know I'm there. Email me, edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.